The hum of the ship's engines resonated throughout the command deck as Captain John Reynolds stared out of the viewport. The vast expanse of space stretched out before him, an endless sea of stars. It was moments like this that made him appreciate the quiet beauty of the universe. He'd been in command of the Ares for years now, but every new mission still held a certain thrill. This time they were heading to Zoreth 9, a newly discovered planet that had been of interest to humanity for its potential resources and strategic value. The mission was straightforward: establish contact with the native species, assess their technology, and determine whether the planet could be integrated into the human alliance. It wasn't the kind of assignment that excited most people. There were no grand battles to fight or world-altering discoveries to make. But John was a diplomat at heart. He believed that humanity's future lay in cooperation with other civilizations, not conflict. He looked forward to meeting the Zorians, an alien species humanity had never encountered before. As the Ares glided smoothly through the atmosphere, John gathered his thoughts. He had read all the available reports on Zoreth 9. The Zorians were an advanced species, both technologically and culturally. They were known for their vast cities, towering structures that seemed to touch the skies, and their deep understanding of the universe. Despite their impressive advancements, however, they were also known for their somewhat unusual customs, especially when it came to interactions with other species. John wasn't entirely sure what to expect when they landed. From the limited data, he had learned that the Zorians valued strength, both physical and intellectual. They had little patience for weakness, and their queen, Relissa, was said to be both feared and admired across the galaxy. She was said to be as striking in appearance as she was in intellect, an aura of mystery surrounding her that both fascinated and intimidated those who encountered her. The ship touched down with a gentle thud, and the crew sprang into action. John made his way to the airlock, where he was greeted by a small delegation of Zorians. Their tall, regal figures towered over him, and their alien features were both unsettling and mesmerizing. The Exorians had a sleek, elegant appearance, their skin a deep shade of violet, with sharp, striking features that seemed almost otherworldly. John stood tall, his posture calm and confident, trying not to show the slightest hint of unease. He was a captain after all, and it was his job to represent humanity. "Captain Reynolds," a deep voice spoke, drawing his attention. The leader of the delegation, a tall figure with a commanding presence, stepped forward. His dark eyes gleamed with intelligence. "We welcome you to Zoreth 9. John offered a firm handshake, grateful for the straightforward nature of the greeting.
"Thank you. It's an honor to be here. We understand you come with peaceful intentions," the leader said, his tone neutral but firm.
"You will meet with Queen Relissa shortly. Follow us." As they made their way through the sprawling city, John couldn't help but marvel at the architecture. The buildings were enormous, sleek, and curved, designed to blend seamlessly with the landscape. The streets were wide, but devoid of the bustling crowds he had expected. Instead, the city was eerily quiet, its inhabitants moving with purpose but in complete silence. It felt like a place suspended in time, caught between the past and the future. Finally, they arrived at the palace, a towering structure of gleaming metal and glass, with intricate carvings that told stories of the Zorians' long history. It was as if the building itself was a testament to the strength and wisdom of their people. The air inside was cool and still, the silence broken only by the soft echoes of footsteps. John was led into a grand hall where the queen awaited him. She sat upon a throne, her posture regal and commanding. Her violet skin seemed to shimmer in the light, and her long, dark hair cascaded down her back in intricate braids. Her eyes, sharp, calculating, and cold, met John's with a level of intensity that made him feel as though she could see right through him. "Captain Reynolds," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "I trust your journey here was without incident." John nodded, offering a respectful bow.
"It was, Your Majesty. It's an honor to meet you."
Likewise, Relissa replied. She studied him closely, her gaze unwavering. For a moment, the room seemed to grow quieter, the weight of her presence filling every corner. Tell me, Captain, do you think I'm sexy? The question hit John like a bolt of lightning. He had been prepared for many things: a formal greeting, a series of diplomatic discussions, perhaps even some cultural exchange. But this was unexpected. His mind raced, trying to find the right words, but all he could focus on was the directness of the question. It was clear that the Queen wasn't asking for a compliment, but rather testing him, probing him, seeing how he would respond. For a moment, John hesitated. He could feel the pressure of the moment building, the weight of her gaze locking him in place. The Queen's question was a challenge, one he had not prepared for. But then he remembered his training. As a captain, he had dealt with difficult situations before. He had faced down hostile forces and negotiated peace treaties. He had the skills, the experience, and the calm demeanor necessary to navigate this moment with grace. "No," he said finally, his voice steady. "I don't think you're sexy, at least not in the way you might expect." Relissa raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Explain yourself." John met her gaze, unflinching. "What I admire about you isn't your physical appearance, though I can see why others might be drawn to it. It's your strength, your leadership, your intellect. You're a queen, and that's what makes you truly remarkable. It's not your beauty that commands respect. It's your power, your will, your ability to lead." For a long moment, Relissa said nothing. She simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. John could feel the tension in the air, but he didn't break eye contact. He had spoken honestly, and that was all he could do. Finally, Relissa leaned forward, her lips curving into a smile that was both unexpected and unsettling. "Interesting," she said softly. "You are different from the others." John didn't respond, but inwardly, he breathed a sigh of relief. He had expected to be dismissed, to be mocked for his answer, but instead he had earned something more, her curiosity. "Perhaps," Relissa continued, her tone softer now, "humanity has more to offer than I originally thought." He had passed the first test, but he knew there would be more. This encounter was far from over, and as he stood there facing the Queen of the Zorians, he realized that the real challenge had only just begun. Captain John Reynolds had barely settled into his quarters when a new message came through the ship's communication system. It was from Queen Relissa herself. The tone was formal, but carried an undercurrent of intrigue that John couldn't ignore. "Captain Reynolds," the message began, "I am extending an invitation to you for further discussion. Meet me at the Royal Chambers at 1800 hours. There are matters we need to explore together." John sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. "Perhaps humanity has more to offer than I originally thought." What exactly did that mean? Was it an invitation for diplomacy, or something else? John had always been prepared for formal discussions, but he could feel that this meeting was different. The air between them had changed after his honest response to her unexpected question. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew it wouldn't be a normal diplomatic exchange. He checked his watch. It was just before 1700 hours, giving him a little time to prepare. He had read the reports on the Zorians, but none of the data could have predicted what had just transpired between them. It had been a simple question, yet it felt like a test. After a few moments of contemplation, John decided to keep things professional. He straightened his uniform, checked his equipment, and made his way toward the royal chambers. The palace was vast, and the journey through its halls was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. The structure was unlike anything John had ever seen, a blend of advanced technology and ancient traditions, a perfect reflection of the Zorian people themselves. When John arrived, he was escorted by a pair of Zorian guards, their silent steps echoing through the grand hall. Finally, they reached a large chamber, and the door swung open. Inside, Queen Relissa stood at the far end of the room, gazing out of a panoramic window that overlooked the sprawling city. Her posture was regal, and the light from the setting sun illuminated her violet skin in a soft glow. She turned as John entered, her piercing eyes meeting his. For a moment, they simply stood there, silently sizing each other up. She said, her voice calm and measured. "Thank you for coming. Please, join me." John stepped forward, taking a seat across from her. He noticed that the room was quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the palace's internal systems. It was a silence that felt heavy, almost as if the very space around them was holding its breath. "I've been reflecting on our earlier conversation," Relissa began, her tone thoughtful. "Your response was unexpected." "You did not answer as I thought you would." John nodded. "I believe in speaking the truth, Your Majesty. When I see something of value, it is not just the surface that draws me in. It's the substance underneath." The Queen studied him for a moment before speaking again. "Tell me, Captain, what do you truly think of humanity? I have heard much about your species. Some say you are impulsive, driven by emotions, easily swayed by power and greed. Others say you are more than that, capable of greatness, of unity. Which of these is true?" John leaned back in his chair, considering her words. It was clear now that this was more than a simple diplomatic meeting. Relissa was testing him, probing for an understanding of what made humanity tick. He wasn't just a representative of Earth. He was a representative of everything humanity stood for. "We are many things," John said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "We can be impulsive. Yes, we have flaws, and we don't always make the right choices. But we also have the capacity for great things. We are driven by a desire for progress, for exploration. But most importantly, we are capable of empathy, of understanding. We seek connections, not just power." Relissa's eyes narrowed slightly, her gaze intense. "Empathy," she repeated, as though the word was foreign on her tongue. "That is not something I have encountered often in this universe." John shifted in his seat, his expression earnest. "I know it's not common, but that's what makes it so powerful. It's what allows us to overcome the darkest parts of ourselves, and it's what makes us different from other species. We can recognize the value in others, even when they don't share our appearance or our ways." There was a long silence between them as Relissa absorbed his words. She seemed deep in thought, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke again, this time with a different tone, one that was almost playful. "Tell me, Captain, do you consider yourself to be empathetic?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. John was taken aback for a moment. "I try to be," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "I believe it's important to understand those around you, to listen and learn. It's not always easy, but it's necessary." Relissa leaned forward, her eyes studying him more closely. "Then you must understand why I am testing you. I am not a simple ruler, Captain. I am a queen, a leader of my people. I must make decisions that will affect the future of our empire, and those decisions require a strength that most beings do not possess." John met her gaze, recognizing the weight behind her words. "I understand, Your Majesty. Leadership is not an easy burden to carry, but it's also about knowing when to trust others. A good leader knows when to listen, when to seek guidance, and when to open up to new ideas." Relissa sat back in her chair, her posture relaxed but still commanding. "And that is why I invited you here. I see something in you, Captain. Something that intrigues me. Your ability to think beyond the surface, to see the potential in others. That is a rare trait, even among my people." John felt a warmth spread through him at her words, but he didn't let it show. He wasn't here to form personal connections. He was here to ensure humanity's future. But he couldn't deny that Relissa was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her presence was magnetic, and her intelligence was undeniable. "You are testing me," John said, his voice steady. "But what are you truly searching for, Your Majesty?" "What do you want from humanity?" Relissa's eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and something else, perhaps even admiration. "I seek strength. Power, yes, but also the kind of strength that comes from unity. My people are strong, but we are isolated. We need allies, and we need to understand the ways of other species. I need to know if humanity can be a part of that." John nodded. "And what will you do with that knowledge?" Relissa's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "That depends on you, Captain Reynolds." The room fell into silence again, but this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy. It was full of possibilities. John understood now that this was no ordinary mission. He wasn't just here to secure an alliance. He was here to prove that humanity had a place among the stars. As the meeting drew to a close, Relissa stood and extended her hand to John. "You have proven yourself more than capable, Captain." "I look forward to seeing what comes next." John shook her hand, his thoughts swirling. He had come to this planet with one goal: to represent humanity. But now, it seemed that the stakes were much higher. This was more than a diplomatic mission. It was a test of humanity's place in the universe. And the real challenge was just beginning. Days passed, and the atmosphere on Zorath 9 shifted. Captain John Reynolds was no longer simply a diplomat sent to establish a new alliance. He had become a part of something far greater than he had initially anticipated. Queen Relissa's invitation for further discussions had not just been a formality. It was the beginning of a deeper exploration into the future of humanity and the Zorians. John had spent the past several days working closely with the Zorian leadership, including the Queen herself. There was an energy between them that John could not ignore. Relissa's brilliance was undeniable, and her determination to lead her people was admirable. But there was something else in her, something that John couldn't quite place. She was testing him, yes, but she was also learning. Perhaps in some way she was trying to understand herself through him. The meetings had become more frequent, and as time went on, the discussions evolved. At first they had focused on diplomacy, trade, and the potential for peace. But slowly they shifted toward more complex matters. John found himself discussing the future of both their civilizations, the challenges they would face, and the potential they held. It was a conversation about destiny, about what the future could look like if two great civilizations could put aside their differences and work together. On one such day, after a particularly intense round of talks, John found himself once again standing in front of Relissa's chambers. The Queen had invited him for another private meeting, and though he had grown accustomed to her requests, the significance of these encounters weighed on him more with each passing day. As the doors opened, John stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, with large windows offering a breathtaking view of the city below. But it was the Queen herself who drew all of his attention. Relissa was sitting at a long table, her posture as regal as ever, her eyes focused on a holographic map of the galaxy. When she noticed him enter, she looked up and smiled faintly. "Captain Reynolds," she said, her voice calm yet carrying an unmistakable warmth. "You've been busy, I see." John nodded. "I've been learning a lot about your people. The Zorians have a rich history, Your Majesty." "Your leadership has brought them a long way." Relissa's smile deepened, though it was brief. "Leadership is a heavy burden, Captain. You may have noticed that." "I have," John replied, stepping closer. "But you carry it well." She regarded him for a long moment, her sharp eyes never leaving his. "You're starting to understand us," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of approval. "Perhaps you're beginning to see that we are not so different from you after all." John had been studying the map on the table, but now he turned his full attention to Relissa. "I see more every day," he said, his voice steady but with a trace of curiosity. "But there's still something I don't understand."
Relissa raised an eyebrow.
"What's that? Why test me so much? Why push me to answer your questions, to face challenges that seem personal?" The Queen leaned back in her chair, folding her arms thoughtfully. "I'm not simply testing you, Captain. I am testing humanity." Her gaze softened slightly as she continued. "The universe is full of powerful empires and advanced civilizations, but what sets them apart is not their strength alone. It is their capacity to evolve, to adapt, and to trust others. I needed to understand if humanity was capable of these things." John was silent for a moment. He had known that the stakes were high, but hearing the Queen articulate her doubts made the weight of the situation even clearer. She was not just questioning his capabilities, she was questioning humanity's potential as a whole. "I believe humanity is capable of greatness," John said, his voice firm. "We have our flaws, like any species, but we are capable of learning, growing, and building something better." Relissa nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That's what I hope to hear." Then, after a pause, she added, "But you also need to understand something, Captain. My people are facing a grave threat, one that could destroy us all." John's eyes narrowed. "What kind of threat?" "The Sindar," Relissa replied, her voice heavy with concern. "A ruthless empire that has been expanding rapidly across the galaxy. They are a force to be reckoned with, and they have set their sights on Zorath 9. They seek to conquer us, to strip our world of its resources and enslave our people." John felt a surge of urgency. The Sindar had been mentioned briefly in his reports, but hearing Relissa speak of them with such gravity changed everything. "If they're a threat to you, they're a threat to humanity as well," he said. "Exactly," Relissa agreed. "That's why I've been testing you, Captain. If we are to have any chance of survival, we must form an alliance. And it cannot be just a political arrangement. It must be a true partnership, built on trust and shared purpose." John knew this was the moment that would define his mission and perhaps the future of both humanity and the Zorians. The Sindar were a dangerous enemy, and the Zorians had no allies who could match their power. If humanity could help them, it would be the beginning of a new era, one where cooperation between species was not only possible, but essential. "You have my word," John said, his voice filled with conviction. "Humanity will stand by you. We will fight this threat together." Relissa's eyes softened, and for the first time John saw a flicker of something more personal in her gaze. Gratitude, perhaps, or the beginning of something else. "Thank you, Captain Reynolds. You have no idea what this means to us." But as she spoke, a faint alarm went off in the background, drawing both of their attention. A flashing red light indicated an urgent message coming through the ship's communication system. John turned and walked toward the console, his heart pounding as he read the incoming transmission. It was a report from the Ares. The Sindar had just launched an attack on one of the outer colonies, and the battle was already underway. It was worse than anyone had anticipated. The Sindar were not waiting. They were already in motion, and they would not stop until they had claimed everything they could. "We don't have much time," John said, turning back to Relissa. "We need to act now." Rylissa's face hardened, the gravity of the situation settling over her. "Then we will fight, Captain. We will defend our people, and we will stand together." John nodded, the weight of the responsibility now fully upon him. The future of not just humanity, but the Zorians as well, was in their hands. This was no longer just a diplomatic mission. It was a battle for survival. And for the first time since arriving on Zorath, John felt the full weight of the Queen's earlier words. The future of both their civilizations depended on the success of this alliance. If they failed, the cinder would sweep across the galaxy, and everything they had fought for would be lost.
"We will fight together," John said,
his voice resolute. Relissa gave a small, knowing smile, the kind of smile that hinted at something deeper, something unspoken between them.
"Then let us prepare. The battle for the future begins now."
Captain John Reynolds stood on the command deck of the Ares, his eyes scanning the tactical displays in front of him. The starboard side of the ship lit up with the glow of incoming fire as Sindar forces made their move. The Sindar were known for their ruthlessness, and their fleet was vast, far larger than anything humanity had encountered before. But the Zorians, led by Queen Relissa, were not ones to back down. Together, they had formed a plan to defend Zorath. 9, and John had no intention of failing. Beside him, Relissa stood tall, her violet skin glowing in the dim light of the command deck. Her posture was flawless, her eyes sharp and focused on the battle unfolding before them. She wasn't just a leader, she was a force of nature. The Queen had transformed from a figure of intrigue to someone who embodied the strength and determination of her people. She was ready to fight, and so was John.
"We have to move quickly," Rylissa said, her voice steady but full of authority. "The Sindar will not hesitate."
"We need to strike before they can launch their full assault."
John nodded, his fingers flying over the controls as he gave the order to engage. The Ares rumbled beneath his feet as the ship came to life, its engines pushing them into the fray. The battle was now in full swing, and John could hear the distant sounds of explosions reverberating through the ship's hull. He had fought in countless skirmishes before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about defending a colony or securing territory. This was about survival, not just for humanity, but for the Zorians as well. As the Ares entered the heart of the battle, John could see the Sindar fleet in the distance, their warships looming like shadows in the void. The Sindar ships were designed for destruction, massive, imposing vessels that could decimate anything in their path. But the Ares was fast, agile, and armed with the latest human technology. It would take more than sheer size to defeat them. Relissa gave him a nod of approval as the Ares expertly weaved through enemy fire, dodging incoming blasts and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. Her battle tactics were as sharp as her mind, and John was impressed by how quickly she adapted to the chaotic nature of the battle. She was a born leader, and in that moment, he understood just how much she had been through. The weight of the crown, the responsibility of her people. It was all there in her movements and decisions. The battle raged on for hours. The Sindar fought with relentless precision, but the alliance between humanity and the Zorians proved to be a force to be reckoned with. John watched as Relissa's flagship, the Exorian Fury, cut through the Cinder fleet like a knife through butter. She was a strategist, no doubt, but she was also a warrior in her own right. Her command was as precise as any military general's, and she knew when to strike and when to retreat. Her confidence was contagious, and the crew of the Ares followed her orders without hesitation. It wasn't just the firepower that made the difference. It was the unity between the two species. Humanity's adaptability and the Zorian strength complemented each other perfectly. They fought not as separate forces, but as one united front. And for the first time in the history of the galaxy, John truly believed that this was what cooperation between species could look like. John's thoughts were interrupted by a loud alarm blaring throughout the ship. The Ares was hit. The entire deck shuddered, and John felt the ship lurch beneath him. It wasn't a direct hit, but the damage was enough to throw them off course for a moment. He quickly ordered the crew to assess the situation, and within seconds, the damage control team was on it.
"Status report,"
John said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the tension in the air.
"We've lost partial power to the starboard engines," came the response. "We can still maneuver, but we're at reduced speed."
"Shields are holding, but we need a few minutes to repair."
"We don't have minutes,"
John muttered under his breath. The battle was far from over, and they needed to keep the pressure on the Sindar.
Can we get them back online? It's possible, but the repairs will take time. John looked up at Relissa, her face as composed as ever. We can't afford to stop.
We need to push through and end this fight now. Can your flagship cover us while we make repairs? Relissa didn't hesitate. "Oh, we'll handle it," she said. "Keep your ship intact. We need you for the final strike." She turned and left the command deck without another word, her guards following closely behind. John watched as the Queen's ship moved into position, flanking the Sindar fleet and opening fire with precision. She wasn't just leading her people, she was fighting for them. And in that moment, John realized just how much she had grown, not just as a leader, but as an ally. The repair crew worked quickly, and within minutes, the Ares was back at full strength. The ship's engines roared to life once more, and John gave the order to resume the attack. The Sindar fleet was beginning to falter, but they weren't defeated yet. John's heart pounded as he watched the battle unfold before him. There was no time to second guess. They had to win, and they had to win now. "All systems are operational," the crew reported. "We're ready for the final assault. Prepare to launch the main offensive. Focus all fire on their flagship." The Ares surged forward, its weapon systems locked on the Sindar flagship. It was a massive vessel, heavily armored and bristling with weapons, but it was also their most vulnerable target. The Sindar had underestimated the combined strength of humanity and the Zorians, and now they were paying the price. The final assault came in a series of devastating blows. The Ares fired its torpedoes with deadly accuracy, striking the Sindar flagship's weak points and ripping through its hull. Relissa's Orion Fury provided cover fire, picking off smaller Sindar vessels and ensuring they couldn't flank John's ship. Together, the two ships made quick work of the remaining enemy forces. The final blow came when the Sindar flagship exploded in a massive burst of light, sending debris scattering in all directions. The Sindar forces, seeing their command vessel destroyed, began to retreat, their morale shattered. The battle was over. John took a deep breath, his heart still racing from the intensity of the fight. The victory was hard won, but it was a victory nonetheless. He turned to the communication officer. "Send word to Queen Relissa. The battle is over, and we have won." As the message went out, John allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. They had defended Zorath, 9, and in doing so, they had secured an alliance that would last for generations. The future of both humanity and the Zorians was now brighter than ever. Within moments, Relissa's voice came through the comms.
"Captain Reynolds, we have won!"
Zorao 9 is safe.
John smiled. "We couldn't have done it without you, Your Majesty." Relissa's voice softened, a rare warmth in her tone.
"It was a team effort, Captain. We fought as one.
And for that, we will remember this day forever."
John looked out at the vast expanse of space, the stars twinkling in the distance.
It had been a long road to this point, but it was a road worth traveling. Together, humanity and the Zorians had faced a common enemy and emerged victorious. It was a new beginning, one that held endless possibilities for both species. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning, and as John stood there, looking out at the stars, he knew that the future was bright, not just for humanity, but for all those who dared to stand together.